The neighborhood bustled with life, vibrant yet weighed down by signs of neglect. Children played near cracked sidewalks, their laughter mixing with the hum of distant music. Bright murals painted on graffiti-marked walls told stories of resilience, a community's attempt to reclaim beauty amid hardship. Jamal Carter walked with purpose, his worn notebook clutched under his arm. The frayed pages, filled with detailed sketches of buildings, were symbols of his dreams, a desire to craft beauty from chaos. The convenience store door jingled as Jamal stepped out, a bottle of juice and a pack of chips in hand for his younger sister. The warm air wrapped around him, thick with the sounds of street vendors calling out their wares. His steps faltered at the sudden screech of tires slicing through the atmosphere, silencing the hum of the street. A police cruiser skidded to a halt, drawing wary glances from bystanders. Officers Donnelly and Mitchell emerged, their expressions cold and authoritative. The street, once lively, grew tense as if holding its breath. Jamal's heart quickened, but he kept his face composed. He knew the rules. Stay respectful. Don't provoke, and maybe, just maybe, you'll walk away unscathed. Donnelly's gaze swept over Jamal, his eyes sharp with unwarranted suspicion. With heavy, deliberate steps, he closed the distance between them, the weight of authority palpable in the air. The officer's questions were curt, layered with an accusation Jamal had neither invited nor deserved. The demand to empty his pockets came with a thinly veiled threat. Jamal hesitated, glancing at the gathering crowd. His stomach tightened, but compliance felt like the only option. Slowly, he pulled out his keys, a pencil, and finally, his prized notebook. The worn cover landed on the pavement, its pages splayed like wounded wings. Mitchell picked it up, flipping through Jamal's meticulous sketches with a smirk that twisted into mockery. Jamal clenched his fists at the casual disregard for his work, but he forced himself to remain still. He remembered his father's words. Don't let them break you. More bystanders gathered, their phones lifted, capturing the scene. Whispers turned into audible murmurs. People exchanged knowing glances, their expressions a mix of anger and weariness. This was a story they had seen too often, lived too many times. Claire Whitaker stood across the street, clutching a stack of community flyers. Her breath hitched as she watched the scene unfold. Fear and indecision warred within her. She had always believed in justice, but belief was different from action. Her feet felt rooted to the ground, heavy with doubt. The tension thickened as Donnelly stepped closer to Jamal, his voice low and threatening. The air buzzed with the weight of the moment, teetering on the edge of escalation. Claire's pulse raced, her conscience a flickering flame urging her to act. The crowd's presence became a force, unspoken yet undeniable. Eyes locked onto the officers, a collective demand for accountability hanging in the air. The weight of public scrutiny pressed down on Donnelly and Mitchell, their authority momentarily shaken. The officers hesitated, their resolve faltering under the watchful eyes and recording phones. Claire's heart pounded as she finally found the courage to step forward. The moment, charged with uncertainty, shifted as the officers reluctantly retreated. The crowd murmured in relief, tension dissolving like a storm that had passed but left scars in its wake. Jamal straightened, clutching his notebook tightly as if anchoring himself to something real. His gaze met Claire's, gratitude mingling with a newfound strength. The moment had not just been about him. It had been about countless others who had never had witnesses willing to stand up. As the street returned to its rhythm, the echoes of what had transpired lingered in the air. Jamal's steps were firmer now, each one carrying the weight of resilience and the promise of a story that wasn't over yet. Jamal's fingers trembled slightly as he pulled out his belongings, keys, a pencil, and finally his notebook with its worn cover and fraying edges. He kept his movements slow and deliberate, trying to ignore the growing pit of fear in his stomach. "That all you got?" Officer Donnelly sneered, stepping forward with an air of mock authority. "Yes, sir," Jamal answered quietly, his voice steady despite the dread tightening his chest. Mitchell, the second officer, chuckled dryly. "Bet there's something in the waistband. They always got something there." Before Jamal could react, Donnelly grabbed him roughly by the arm and shoved him against the side of the patrol car. His chest hit the cold metal with a dull thud. "Didn't do anything." Jamal's voice cracked as the words burst from him, raw and desperate. "You watch your tone, boy," Donnelly growled close to Jamal's ear. The street fell eerily silent, the hum of passing cars and distant music fading as bystanders stopped in their tracks. Some pulled out their phones, their cameras capturing every second of the escalating scene. Murmurs rippled through the growing crowd. Jamal's heart raced as he spotted familiar faces from school among the onlookers. He saw Malik, his classmate from geometry, wide-eyed and frozen. A group of girls from his homeroom whispered to each other, their expressions a mix of pity and discomfort. Jamal's face burned with humiliation. Claire Whitaker stood at the edge of the crowd, her hand gripping the strap of her messenger bag so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her breath came in shallow bursts as she watched the scene unfold. Her instincts screamed at her to walk away, stay safe, stay silent. But another voice, quieter yet insistent, gnawed at her conscience. She remembered the last time something like this had happened. A black teen pinned to the ground outside the community center. She hadn't stepped in then, and guilt had haunted her ever since. Donnelly muttered something under his breath, the words laced with venom. Typical, always playing the victim. The sting of the words cut through Jamal like a blade. He clenched his fists at his sides, fighting the urge to push back. His father's voice echoed in his mind, steady and wise. "They want to see you break. Don't give them the satisfaction." Claire's heart pounded as she took a shaky breath. Her legs felt like lead, but she forced herself to step forward. The crowd parted slightly, their eyes flicking between her and the officers. "What's your probable cause?" she demanded, her voice wavering but resolute. Donnelly turned sharply, his eyes narrowing at the unexpected challenge. "Stay out of this, lady. You're obstructing an investigation." Claire's throat went dry, but she didn't back down. She pulled out her phone, her hands trembling as she hit the record button. The red light blinked, capturing every second. "You're harassing him without cause," she said, louder this time. "We all see it." The crowd murmured in agreement, emboldened by her defiance. "We see what you're doing," a voice shouted, from the back. Donnelly's confident facade wavered as more witnesses raised their phones, the weight of public scrutiny pressing down on him. Mitchell shifted uneasily. "We don't need this kind of scene," he muttered to Donnelly. Jamal's fists remained clenched, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. The urge to retaliate pulsed through him, hot and insistent. But his father's words anchored him, grounding him in the chaos. He straightened his back, meeting Donnelly's gaze without fear. His quiet dignity spoke volumes, a silent defiance that needed no violence to be heard. Claire's voice steadied as she continued filming. "Everyone's watching," she said firmly. Donnelly's jaw tightened. He motioned sharply to Mitchell. "Let's go." The officers retreated to their cruiser, their authority diminished by the weight of public witness. The crowd murmured in relief, the tension dissipating like a storm that had passed but left scars in its wake. Jamal exhaled shakily, his grip tightening around his notebook. Claire lowered her phone, her heart still racing. "You okay?" she asked softly, stepping closer to Jamal. He nodded, his voice quiet but steady. "Yeah, thanks." Their eyes met, a brief but profound connection forged in the crucible of injustice. As the crowd dispersed, Jamal stood taller. Each step he took a testament to resilience. His father's words echoed once more, not as a warning, but as a victory. "They want to see you break. Don't give them the satisfaction." Jamal winced as the officer's grip tightened on his arms, twisting them forcefully behind his back. The pain seared through his shoulders, but he bit down his frustration, refusing to show weakness. The world around him blurred, filled with murmurs and the clicking of phone cameras. His heart raced, humiliation mingling with a simmering anger he struggled to contain. He felt the weight of countless eyes on him, classmates passing by, some whispering, others averting their gaze. Claire stood rooted nearby, her breath quick and shallow. Fear gripped her, but something stronger pressed against it, pushing her forward. Years of silence, years of conditioned obedience clawed at her mind, urging her to turn away. But the injustice unfolding before her demanded more than apathy. Her fists clenched as she fought to steady herself. She knew this wasn't just about one moment. It was about every time she'd stayed silent when something felt wrong. The officers continued their grim work, heedless of the crowd gathering around them. Jamal's composure cracked as he struggled to stay calm, haunted by the echo of his father's voice urging him not to break under pressure. The shame weighed heavily on him, yet deep inside, a spark of defiance refused to be extinguished. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder, shifting from uncertainty to solidarity. Phones remained raised, capturing every brutal second. What had begun as passive observation transformed into a wave of communal strength, an unspoken, yet palpable, demand for justice. The oppressive hold of fear began to weaken, dissolving under the weight of a community united in defiance. What once felt like isolation for Jamal now became something stronger. A symbol of resilience, of countless voices rising together against injustice. And though Jamal's wrists throbbed from the officer's grip, he stood taller, his dignity intact, knowing this moment would reverberate far beyond the street where it had begun. The tension that had gripped the street finally began to ease. The officers, once brimming with authority, now stood under the weight of public scrutiny. Their confident postures faltered as more bystanders raised their phones, capturing every detail of the scene. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder, turning into demands for justice. Faced with mounting pressure, the officers exchanged tense glances before reluctantly stepping back. Their retreat was slow, deliberate, but undeniable. A rare moment of accountability forced by the collective strength of the community. Jamal straightened his back, his breaths still shaky but controlled. Claire, standing a few steps away, locked eyes with him. No words were needed. The glance they shared spoke of gratitude, solidarity, and a profound respect born from the chaos they had just endured. Jamal nodded ever so slightly, and Claire's lips pressed into a determined line. The crowd didn't disperse immediately. Witnesses lingered, energized by what they had witnessed. Phones remained raised, videos already circulating online. Within minutes, posts flooded social media, calling for justice and accountability. The street, once a backdrop for intimidation, now buzzed with the power of collective action. News outlets quickly picked up the story. By evening, local channels broadcast footage of the confrontation. Anchors spoke in measured tones about the growing calls for an internal investigation into Officers Donnelly and Mitchell. Statements from community leaders demanded answers, while public outrage spread beyond the neighborhood. In the days that followed, Claire found herself unable to return to the sidelines. The weight of what she had witnessed and the role she had played pressed heavily on her conscience. She knew she couldn't go back to being a passive observer. Determined to channel her newfound conviction into action, she began attending community meetings, organizing workshops on police accountability, and rallying others to speak up against injustice. Her voice, once hesitant, now carried a steady resolve. Jamal, too, was transformed by the experience. The pain and humiliation lingered, but he refused to be defined by it. Late at night, he sat at his desk sketching furiously. His pencil moved across the paper, capturing scenes of resilience, solidarity, and hope. Each line was a testament to the strength of his community and his own journey toward healing. One day, Claire visited Jamal's home. She marveled at the powerful images that covered his walls, drawings that depicted not just the pain of that day, but the triumph of standing tall in the face of adversity. "These are incredible," she said softly, her voice filled with awe. Jamal's work didn't go unnoticed. A local gallery featured his sketches in a community exhibit, and word spread quickly. Soon, he received an offer that left him speechless, a scholarship to a prestigious architecture program. For the first time in a long while, he saw a future filled with possibility. Claire's journey continued as well. She reflected deeply on her role as an ally, recognizing that silence was complicity. Her transformation inspired others, and the community began to rally behind her efforts. She knew there was still much work to be done, but she was no longer afraid to stand up for what was right. Jamal, once quiet and reserved, emerged as a leader in his own right. His story became a beacon of hope for others facing similar challenges. He spoke at community events, sharing his journey and encouraging others to find their voices. His strength and resilience inspired many, proving that even in the face of injustice, dignity and courage could prevail. As time passed, Jamal and Claire's paths remained intertwined, their bond strengthened by shared experiences and a commitment to change. Together they envisioned a community where healing and connection thrived. One evening, Jamal sat at his desk, sketching a design for a community center, a space dedicated to unity, learning, and growth. His pencil moved with purpose, each stroke filled with hope. As he worked, his thoughts turned to those who had come before him, those whose voices had been silenced. In his mind, their stories whispered a simple but powerful truth. We rise not just because of who we are, but because of who stands beside us. That message, etched into his heart, became the foundation for everything he created moving forward. And though systemic issues persisted, the spark of courage and allyship they had ignited continued to burn brightly, lighting the path toward meaningful change.